माधव जय कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभ जय गिरिवर धारी। जय गिरिवर धारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभ जय गिरिवर धारी। जय गिरिवर धारी। जय यशोदानंदन जय ब्रज जनरंजन। जय यशोदानंदन जय ब्रज जनरंजन। जय यमुना तीरवनचारी जय कुंज बिहारी। जय यमुना तीरवनचारी जय कुंज बिहारी। जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा। प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा। जय गुरुदेवा 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 जय गुरुदेवा। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य स्तोत्र षट श्रीमद् डिवाइन ग्रेस AC भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर षट श्रीमद् डिवाइन ग्रेस श्रीला भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर महाराज की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमा श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 25, Text 29. Please repeat. Yo yogo bhagavat bano nirvan atmamam stayoditaha kidrishaha kati changani yatastatva avabodhanam. Yo yogo bhagavat bano nirvan atmamam stvayoditaha kidrishaha kati changani yatastatva avabodhanam. Yo yogo bhagavat bano nirvan atmamam stvayoditaha kidrishaha kati changani yatastatva avabodhanam. Yo yogo bhagavat bano nirvan atmamam stvayoditaha kidrishaha kati changani yatastatva avabodhanam. Yo yogo bhagavat bano nirvan atmam stvayoditaha kidrishaha kati changani yatastatva avabodhanam. Yo yogo bhagavat bano nirvan atmam stvayoditaha kidrishaha kati changani yatastatva avabodhanam. Vaishnavis, please. Yo yogo bhagavat bano nirvan stvayoditaha kidrishaha kati changani yatastatva avabodhanam. Yo yogo bhagavat bano nirvan atmam stvayoditaha kidrishaha kati changani yatastatva avabodhanam. Yo yogo bhagavat bano nirvan stvayoditaha Translation. Ya, which yoga, mystic yoga process. Bhagavad Bana, aiming at the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nirvan Atman, O embodiment of Nirvan. Tvaya, by you. Uditaha, explained. Kidrishaha, of what nature? Kati, how many? Cha, and. Angani, branches. Yataha, by which? Tattva, of the truth. Avabodhanam, understanding. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The mystic yoga system, as you have explained, aims at the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is meant for completely ending material existence. Please let me know the nature of that yoga system. How many ways are there by which one can understand in truth that sublime yoga? Please repeat. The mystic yoga system, as you have explained, aims at the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is meant for completely ending material existence. Please let me know the nature of that yoga system. How many ways are there by which one can understand in truth that sublime yoga? Purport. There are different kinds of mystic yoga systems aiming for different phases of the absolute truth. The Jnana Yoga system aims at the impersonal Brahman effulgence, and the Hatha Yoga system aims at the localized personal aspect, the Paramatma feature of the absolute truth. Whereas Bhakti Yoga or devotional service, which is executed in 9 different ways, headed by hearing and chanting, aims at complete realization of the Supreme Lord. There are different methods of self-realization, but here Devahuti especially refers to the Bhakti Yoga system, which has already been primarily explained by the Lord. The different parts of the Bhakti Yoga system are hearing, chanting, remembering, offering prayers, worshipping the Lord in the temple, accepting service to Him, carrying out His orders, making friendship with Him, and ultimately surrendering everything for the service of the Lord. The word Nirvan Atman is very significant in this verse. Unless one accepts the process of devotional service, one cannot end the continuation of material existence. As far as Jnanis are concerned, they are interested in Jnana Yoga. But even if one elevates oneself after a great performance of austerity to the Brahman effulgence, there is a chance of falling down again to the material world. Therefore, Jnana Yoga does not actually end material existence. Similarly, regarding the Hatha Yoga system, which aims at the localized aspect of the Lord, Paramatma, it has been experienced that many yogis, such as Vishwamitra, fall down. But Bhakti yogis, once approaching the Supreme Personality of Godhead, never come back to this material world, as it is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Yat gatva na nivartante. Upon going, one never comes back. Taktva deham punarjama naiti. After giving up this body, he never comes back again to accept a material body. Nirvan does not finish the existence of the soul. The soul is ever existing. Therefore, Nirvan means to end one's material existence. And to end material existence means to go back home, back to Godhead. Sometimes it is asked how the living entity falls down from the spiritual world to the material world. Here is the answer. Unless one is elevated to the Vaikuntha planets, directly in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is prone to fall down, either from the impersonal Brahman realization or from an ecstatic trance of meditation. Another word in this verse, Bhagavad Vana, is very significant. Vana means arrow. The Bhakti Yoga system is just like an arrow aiming up to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Bhakti Yoga system never urges one towards the impersonal Brahman effulgence or to the point of Paramatma realization. This barn or arrow is so sharp and swift that it goes directly to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, penetrating the regions of impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma. Translation once again. The mystic yoga system, as you have explained, aims at the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is meant for completely ending material existence. Please let me know the nature of that yoga system. How many ways are there by which one can understand in truth that sublime yoga? Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this canto is Canto 3 and we're reading from chapter 25, text 29. Canto 3 is entitled The Status Quo and the chapter is entitled The Glories of Devotional Service. So just status quo actually means the current state of affairs. So this is a very important canto here which is talking about the current state of affairs as it is going on for that particular event and circumstances. And chapter 25 is the glories of devotional service. We've been reading this, the conversation between Mother Devahuti and her son Lord Kapila, who is Krishna himself here. So this is a brilliant purport as usual, and this is a question which is being asked by Mother Devahuti to her son Lord Kapila. And she's asking a very pertinent question here. So if we go back to text number 26 here, Lord Kapila had said, this process of Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of mystic power. And then Mother Devahuti asks here, please let me know the nature of that yoga system. How many ways are there by which one can understand that particular yoga system? So, based on the purport, Srila Prabhupada has actually talked about several different things, and I'll actually break it down based on exactly what's written in the purport. The first thing for us to understand is that yoga, in its real sense, is only meant for Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna. It is not meant for any demigods. It is not meant for any exalted personalities or human beings. It is exclusively meant for Lord Krishna. And in fact, there are three kinds of yoga systems based on the purport here. There is Jnana Yoga, there is Hatha Yoga, and then there is Bhakti Yoga. So Mother Devahuti is really curious to know what entails this yoga system, and she is genuinely expressing her desire to know the knowledge. She is Lord Kapila's mother, but here she has taken the role of his disciple, and she's praying to him, please explain to me what this yoga system is all about. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that the whole goal of the yoga system is simply one, and that is to end our material existence and get out of the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. So if we look at the three yoga systems, Jnana Yoga, Hatha Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga is predominantly meant for the impersonalists who are aspiring to merge into the Brahman effulgence of the Lord. And then Hatha Yoga, which is today, in today's age, Hatha Yoga is basically thought to be gymnastics, bodily postures and bodily rites and rituals to make the body healthy, but that's not what the true goal of Hatha Yoga is. Hatha Yoga is actually meant to meditate on the super soul or Paramatma within our hearts and connect with the Lord. And Hatha Yoga is actually aspired for by the yogis and the meditators. But beyond this, Bhakti Yoga is the highest, because Bhakti Yoga is practiced by the devotees of the Lord in a mood of personal service. So if we look at Jnana Yoga and Hatha Yoga, there is no direct connection with the personality of Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada has given this brilliant analogy which we often quote to understand how the impersonalism is different from the meditation, is different from devotion. The classic example is the sun. There is a sun planet, and then there is the sun disk, and then there is the sun rays. The sun rays are all pervasive. They are pervading everywhere, and you can see the rays everywhere. In the same way, the Brahman effulgence is also all pervasive. It's everywhere. But Brahman effulgence does not reflect the personality of Godhead here. So that's just partial realization of the absolute truth. Likewise, when we talk about meditators, the yogis who are deep in trance and they're practicing a lot of penances and austerities. They're trying to understand the Paramatma within the heart. Again, the personal concept of the Lord is not achieved here. That is also partial realization of the absolute truth. But the icing on the cake is Bhakti Yoga, which is the personal realization of the absolute truth, also referred to as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So why are these known as partial realizations? If we look at the word Satchid Anand, we say Satchid Anand Vigraha. Our deities are Satchid Anand Vigraha, a form full of eternality, cognizance or knowledge, as well as perpetual bliss. So it is mentioned here, particularly in Bhagavad Gita, the introduction, the impersonalistic philosophy or the Gyan Yoga is basically only satisfying the Sat aspect of the absolute truth. That means the eternality. Then if we move one step forward, the Hatha Yoga or the meditation, they satisfy the Sat and the Chit potency. So that's eternality and cognizance. But beyond that, if we want to achieve full happiness, full joy, full bliss, we have to resort to Bhakti Yoga, because through Bhakti Yoga, all three aspects are realized: Sat, Chid and Anand. And Anand is what we are aspiring for. If we ask somebody, Prabhu or Mataji, what do you want in life? Do you want eternality? Do you want knowledge? Or do you want to be happy? Naturally, people would say, I want to be joyful, I want to be blissful. And that is only achieved by rendering personal devotional service to the Lord. That is why the position of Bhakti Yogi is the highest amongst all these three kinds of yoga. And then Srila Prabhupada also mentions that Bhakti Yoga is very interesting and very attractive because it is an active principle, whereas the other two, merging into the Brahman effulgence or meditating on the Paramatma within our hearts, these are not active principles. In fact, when we see some yogis, they are far away from the realization, from the civilization. They may be meditating on very austere places like mountains and caves. But Bhakti Yoga is not like that. Bhakti Yoga means actively engaging in the service of the Lord. And all of us who are sitting here are actively engaged in the service of the Lord. And the classic example, which is quoted here, is from Canto 7, Chapter 5, text 23 and 24, from one of the Mahajans, Prahlad Maharaj, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnur, Smaran Pada Sevanam, Archanam Vandanam Dasyam, Sakhyam Atma Nivedanam. These are the 9 processes of devotional service. And Srila Prabhupada really extensively stresses on this in the book. We start with hearing, which is Shravanam, which is the most important for all of us. Through the hearing, actually the words of the Lord go into our heart and they purify our heart. And we do need to purify our heart, because we don't purify hearts, how will Krishna come and sit in there? The Paramatma is sitting there, but Paramatma is like a bird who is witnessing all our actions. He's the observer, he's the controller, and he's basically guiding us. But we want to have a personal connection with the Lord. We want to see how beautiful he is, how can we serve him, and so forth. For that, we need to clean our hearts. By cleansing our existence, we can actually serve the Lord. And then we'll talk about how bhakti is compared to an arrow towards Krishna. This is a very sweet discussion or mention how bana, which is an arrow, is used to actually, I don't want to use the word attack, but to actually go towards Lord Krishna, because we are rendering our love to the Lord. We are praying to the Lord, please accept my love at your lotus feet. So Krishna can engage us in his service. I want to read something that Srila Prabhupada has mentioned in Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 11, just to impress about the 3 aspects of the absolute truth. Quote, "The absolute truth is both subject and object, and there is no qualitative difference there. Therefore, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are qualitatively one and the same. The same substance is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of the Upanishads, as localized Paramatma by the Hiranyagarbhas or the yogis, and as Bhagavan by the devotees. In other words, Bhagavan, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the last word of the absolute truth. Paramatma is a partial representation of the personality of Godhead, and impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead, as the sun rays are to the sun god. Less intelligent students of either of the above schools sometimes argue in favor of their own respective realization. But those who are perfect seers of the absolute truth know well that the above three features of the one absolute truth are different perspective views seen from different angles of vision. Very important. Qualitatively, all three are the same. But depending on our angle of vision, we see all three of them separately here. So, another very important point here, which is mentioned here, is nirvan. Nirvan basically is a very common word which is used in the sect of Buddhism. And Lord Buddha commonly used the word nirvan. Nirvan means liberation, liberation from this material existence. But when we liberate ourselves, where do we go? That is the big difference here. We don't want to merge into the Brahman effulgence because there is no personal, intimate relationship with the Lord. We don't want to go into voidism or impersonalism. In fact, that's what Srila Prabhupada came to the Western world to destroy, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi. We want to actually associate with the Lord in His planets, either in Vaikuntha, in a mood of awe and reverence, or in Goloka, where also we have to serve the Lord in a mood of awe and reverence, along with layers of our pure love here. So one interesting aspect, which is, I'm sure, a lot of the preachers get this question, is it is asked how the living entity falls down from the spiritual world to the material world. And the whole reason for this, it's very interesting, and please do correct me. I beg my senior Shiksha Gurus to correct me based on my understanding what I've read of Srila Prabhupada's purports. The whole reason of falling down from the spiritual world is because Krishna has given us free will. And we have this independence, which is marginal independence. So we can exercise this marginal independence even in Goloka and Vaikuntha. That's actually pretty awe-inspiring. That this independence, where we are actually supposed to serve the Lord in any of the 5 rasas, still we have that independence to turn our face away from the Lord, which is actually very bewildering. So it is mentioned here that we can actually exercise this marginal independence in 2 ways. For material causes, in which case we use the word fall down into the material world. And Krishna says, you want to be exercising your free will, you want to be independent of me, so I will create a little playground for you, so you can actually do whatever you want. And that is why the material world is created. And it is also mentioned that this independence can also be exercised without any material cause. So when personalities come from the spiritual world down to the material world, my understanding, as based on my readings, are they could be because of 3 reasons. 1, because of our own free will. We want to turn away from the Lord, in which case the Lord says, okay, you go and enjoy in the material world. That means we become conditioned souls. Secondly, personalities come from the spiritual world to the so-called material world because Krishna wants to have a leela with them. He wants to play with them. Either the play is in a playful mood or in an aggressive fighting mood. And that is Jaya and Vijay, who are the doorkeepers of Lord Narayan's kingdom in Vaikuntha, and so they had to come down. And then, 3rd reason why personalities come is they are part of the entourage of Krishna. So the Yadu dynasty came down to Vraja, Vrindavan, to actually assist him in his mission to enact his pastime in Vrindavan. So, but for us conditioned souls, our reason for coming to the material world is not because we are associates of the Lord or this is the Lord's Leela. This is because we want to exercise our free will. At least I speak for myself. We wanted to rebel away from the Lord, and so we are actually entangled in this conditioned shackles here. And I'm going to read another small dialogue. It's very interesting because this actually gives a very clear conception when people ask, why do we fall from the spiritual world? If we are eternally parts and parcels of the Lord, why do we even fall from the spiritual if we are actually meant to be there? So please bear with me as I read this. This is a dialogue between a devotee and Srila Prabhupada. I'm going to read 2 of them here. Devotee says, quote, "Well, I believe you once said that once a conditioned soul becomes perfected and gets out of the material world and he goes to Krishna Loka, there is no possibility of falling back." And Srila Prabhupada says, quote, "No, there is possibility, but he does not come. Just like after putting your hand in the fire, you never put it again if you are really intelligent." So once we are burnt in this fire of material existence, we have to learn from our mistakes. So if we are fortunate enough to be able to go back to Godhead, Srila Prabhupada says, but he does not come back, provided we learn from our mistakes, because this material world is samsara dava, which is a fire. Continuing, so those who are going back to Godhead, they become intelligent. Why going back to Godhead? Just like we are in renounced order of life, so we have renounced our family life after thinking something. So this is Srila Prabhupada, who is giving us a very clear-cut indication, which actually should make us very hopeful and very optimistic that what we are doing in Krishna consciousness is absolutely perfect. In fact, it is the most perfect. We've heard there is perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. So Krishna consciousness is the most perfect, because once we realize what our goal in life is, we actually go back to Godhead if we practice Krishna consciousness submissively, sincerely, and in a humble mood. So I'm going to read another one, which is from Perfection of Yoga, chapter 6, which is entitled The Fate of the Unsuccessful Yogi. Quote, "It is not that Bhagavad Gita rejects the meditational yoga process." So we talked about Gyan Yoga, Hatha Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, and Srila Prabhupada is giving a brilliant narrative here. It is not that Bhagavad Gita rejects the meditational yoga process. It recognizes it as a bona fide method, but it further indicates that it is not possible in this age. So meditation is a bona fide process, but it is not possible because our mental attentions are very, very low in this particular age. Arjun asks, what is the destination of the man of faith who does not persevere, who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism? This is Bhagavad Gita 6:37. And then Krishna tells Arjun that even if one sincerely cultivates only 1% worth of spiritual knowledge, he will never fall down into the material whirlpool. This is a reason of great optimism for us. Of course, that does not mean that we should cultivate only 1% of spiritual knowledge. We should cultivate 100%. But here, this is the power of spiritual knowledge, that even 1% cultivation will give us supreme outcomes here. It should always be understood that we are weak and the material energy is very strong. The unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people. So this is the hope which is given to us, indicating that spiritual knowledge is the very highest here. And I'm going to read the last one because I found them to be very, very instructive to me personally. And this is recounted by Her Grace Vishakha Mataji, Vishakha Devi Dasi. And this is based on a room conversation on June 23rd, 1975, right here in Los Angeles. This is a conversation between a professor of psychology, Dr. John Mizze, and Srila Prabhupada. So Dr. John Mizze asks, did all the souls that were in the spiritual sky fall out of the spiritual sky at once or at different times? Or are there any souls that are always good? They're not foolish. They don't fall down. Srila Prabhupada said, no, there are. Majority, 90%, they are always good. That means 10% are the ones who fall down. Quote again, they never fall down. Dr. Mizze says, so we are among the 10%. Srila Prabhupada says, yes, or less than that. In the whole material world, all the living entities, they are just like in the prison house. There is some population, but they're not majority. The majority of the population, they are outside the prison house. That means in the spiritual world. Similarly, majority of living being part and parcel of God, they are in the spiritual world. Only a few fall down. So material world is only 1/4 of Krishna's creation. The 3/4 is spiritual world. So if we believe that 7 billion people are so high on this planet Earth, what to speak of billions and trillions of individual personalities who are in the spiritual world. Continuing here, Dr. Meze says, does Krishna know ahead of time that a soul is going to be foolish and fall? Srila Prabhupada says, Krishna? Yes, Krishna may know because he is omniscient. Dr. Meze says, are more souls falling all the time? Srila Prabhupada says, not all the time, but there is the tendency of fall down, not for all, but because there is independence. Everyone is not liking to misuse the independence. The same example. Just like a government constructing a city and constructs also prison house because the government knows that somebody will be criminal. So their shelter must also be constructed. It is very easy to understand. Not that 10% population will be criminal, but government knows that some of them will be. Otherwise, why they construct prison house also? One may say, where is the criminal you are constructing? Government knows there will be criminal. So if the ordinary government can know, why God cannot know? Because there is tendency. So this is, it's absolutely brilliant how our independence is explained with the perspective of our falling down from the spiritual world here. So this marginal independence has to be exercised very carefully, very tactfully, and very, very cautiously. Particularly in this human form of life, we know there are 8,400,000 species of life, of which the 400,000 are actually human beings. So we have gone through this very, very tiring and very cumbersome evolutionary cycle. We don't know what we were. Probably small animals, birds, trees, and so forth. But finally, we have reached the highest pinnacle of this particular creation, which is the human beings here. And if we waste our human form of life, that would be a great misfortune, because then we will have to take birth again based on our karma, based on our thoughts at the last moment of a lifetime, which will dictate our next lifetime here. So I just want to end here based on the example that Srila Prabhupada has given, that a yogi who is in ecstatic trance of meditation can also fall down. It's really hard to imagine somebody who is in ecstasy, completely meditating on the super soul in the heart, can actually fall down. And the example is Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra initially was a Kshatriya king, very powerful, very pious, but through his austerities and penances, he was trying to please the Lord, he actually became a yogi. And then, as usual, the king of the demigods, Lord Indra, became kind of nervous about his position. That if Vishwamitra practices all these austerities and penances, he will become bigger than me and he will take over my position. And I don't want that to happen. Lord Indra is known for having this kind of mentality through his leelas. So what does he do? He sends a very beautiful denizen from the heavenly kingdoms by the name of Menaka. And Menaka is stunningly beautiful. And she comes and she simply walks. And the little ting-ting from her ankle bells actually disturbs the meditation of Vishwamitra. And his meditation is broken. And he engages in union with her, leading to the birth of another beauty known as Shakuntala. And then it is mentioned here that Vishwamitra was intelligent enough to realize his mistake, and he went back to pursue his yogic exercises again. So this is extremely important for us to understand. What to speak of us, even great yogis such as Vishwamitra could actually be captured by the snare of Maya, what to speak of us. But on the other hand, we also see the joy of the bhakti practiced by Srila Haridas Thakur, who was not captured by the snare of Maya. In fact, Maya came to him seeking union with him, but he was able to purify that prostitute simply by the chanting of the holy name. He was so powerful through his pure chanting, she actually became a devotee and wanted to become his disciple. That is the power of the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. One final example that I really want to give in the last 1 minute, which is very interesting and shows you the power of Maya, is the story of Srila Bilva Mangal Thakur. And Bilva Mangal Thakur is an amazing devotee of the Lord. He's the author of Krishna Karnamrita. In his previous life, Srila Bilva Mangal Thakur was a very elevated sannyasi. And he was very, very fond of reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam. And while he would recite the Srimad Bhagavatam, he would hold these discourses, he would feed all the people plenty of prasadam, lots of prasadam. These two things he liked quite a bit in his previous life. He would talk about Bhagavatam and he would feed the people. But one day, after the Bhagavatam Katha, there was not enough money left to make the prasad and feed the people. And so he went and started traveling in the kingdom where he was staying, and he came upon a crematorium where a very beautiful princess who was hardly 18 years of age, who had died, was being cremated by her parents. And this was a very rich princess. And she had all the ornaments on her, diamonds and rubies and, what to speak of, because she was very rich. So Bilva Mangal Thakur, in his previous lifetime, he thought, this princess is already dead. These jewels are of no use to her. I should take all these jewels and I should sell them and get the bhoga to make the prasad and feed all the devotees. So as he's going to grab all her jewels, suddenly a voice comes from her body. And she's saying, stop, don't take my jewels. This is not the right way of earning wealth. You go to my father and tell him, beneath my bed is a little treasure and that has jewels and he will give it to you. And so, Bilva Mangal Thakur, previous life, he goes to her father and says, your dead daughter has given me an instruction that below her bed is a little treasure and you should give that treasure to me. And so the father joyfully gives it because he's a sannyasi and the father is very pious. And so Bilva Mangal Thakur is able to actually feed everybody, but still he's short of a little amount of money. And so again he goes back to the crematorium and nobody's around and there's a diamond necklace there because he's short of a little bit of money. And he goes and starts to grab the diamond necklace and suddenly the voice comes again and says, stop. I had already told you not to take these jewels because this is not the right way of taking the wealth to feed people. So I curse you because you did not understand from this lesson. I curse you because you're lusting after this wealth. In your next lifetime, you will become a very lusty man and you will lust after women. And it is mentioned this princess came in the next lifetime as Chintamani, the prostitute, who actually attracted Bilva Mangal Thakur. And of course, we all know the story of Srila Bilva Mangal Thakur, who was actually very, very attracted to Chintamani, the prostitute. But through her one statement, she was able to turn him into a great devotee of the Lord when she said, if you have such an amazing lusty attraction for my body, if only you had this attraction for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you would have made it. And suddenly it struck him like an arrow. What she said is true. And then he turns into a beautiful devotee of the Lord. In fact, he becomes such an amazing devotee, he actually pierces his eyes and he becomes blind through his own will because he doesn't want to look at women anymore. And it is mentioned that this is one of the purest devotees of the Lord. So I just wanted to give this example of Vishwamitra and Bilva Mangal Thakur, just to impress upon us how Maya is right behind us and can capture us anytime if we let go of our guard. So I would like to stop here. If there's any question, I can take maybe one question. We are a little bit over time. Or comments. If not, we will stop the class here. His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.